most cancers are epigenetic, which means that they are the result of your environment and lifestyle. So my story began when I was diagnosed. Of course, it came as a shock. So I started investigating, well, how could this happen? And then I started doing the research. Now, I'm an interior designer in more ways than one. And I started looking around and auditing my home, auditing the materials that I used. So I started looking at every single thing, Linda, through the lens of design, through the lens of beauty. And when I say beauty, I just don't mean on a skin deep level or an aesthetic level. It's a deeper biological level. It's spiritual alignment. It's cellular alignment. It's being in harmony and in resonance with your space. And so much of our modern life is in dissonance with our biology.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about beauty as a vehicle for healing. I'm delighted to welcome Mahwish Syed. Mahwish is an award-winning fashion and interior designer, celebrated author, cancer survivor, and devoted mother. Her creations have been featured in the New York Times, Architectural Digest, Elle Decor, Hampton's Cottages and Gardens, and more. You can reach Mahwish at her website, claimyourparadise.com, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Welcome, Mahwish. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda.
I am delighted for this conversation and the idea that beauty can help us to heal, not only to make us feel good in our mind, but also to physically help us in healing. And this is something that you have had personal experience with when you were diagnosed with breast cancer. Would you mind sharing your story and explain to us how beauty helped in your healing process?
Thank you so much. I arrived at this wonderful concept and daily practice of allowing beauty to help me recreate my reality. And the reason I want to just start off the bat is really important for me to stress. We are in a living ecosystem. This spiritual, biological, and poetic ecosystem that is a living community between ourselves and our environment. So your environment is your ecosystem. Your body is part of your ecosystem. And a lot of times when we think of that word, we think of something outside of ourselves or outside of our home. And this idea of this macrobiome and a microbiome. So your microbiome are the community of cells that exist inside your body. And also we're in constant communication with our environment, our macrobiome. So, which is your home. And I think it's really important to stress that any kind of, especially cancers, most cancers are epigenetic, which means that they are the result of your environment and lifestyle, which I think is a wonderful gift to realize because that means you have agency. So my story began when I was diagnosed. Of course, it came as a shock. So when I found out that it wasn't a genetic situation for me, I started investigating, well, how could this happen? And then I started doing the research. Now, I'm an interior designer in more ways than one. And I started looking around and auditing my home, auditing the materials that I used. I advise other firms on the use of fabrics and materials. So I started looking at every single thing, Linda, through the lens of design, through the lens of beauty. And when I say beauty, I just don't mean on a skin deep level or an aesthetic level. It's a deeper biological level. It's spiritual alignment. It's cellular alignment. It's being in harmony and in resonance with your space. And so much of our modern life is in dissonance with our biology. And it's really important to recognize that sometimes when things are marketed as being good for our environment, they're not necessarily good for ourselves, our health. So parsing that out and recognizing that difference really allowed me to first, I started auditing my space. So I started removing the things that could be possible toxins. And then from my background in textiles, I started looking at the materials on my furniture, the carpets that I have on my floor, and looking at it through the lens of toxicity as well as vibration. And looking at that, looking at relationships that I was in that were also draining me emotionally. So I really started auditing every single part of that. And then the other part, so we take away those things, but then as I always say, with my clients, if there's a problem, I always try to have the solution in hand in my pocket when I offer the problem. So I'm like, okay, what do we swap this out with? Right. So I started just naturally creating these rituals of reverence and using my five senses to create beauty in my home because I was spending a lot of time at home when I was convalescing. So I started looking at not from just a scientific lens, but from the lens of beauty that is truly healing. And now there are so many studies that prove the wonderful effects of neuroaesthetics on your brainwaves, on your nervous system. And when you are out of that, fight or flight, freeze or fawn mode, from that stress trauma mode in survival mode, and then you get into your parasympathetic state, all these practices that I was doing were creating that calming effect so that I can be in my parasympathetic state so I could heal.
Okay. I am just so impressed as I'm listening to your story. What I am feeling here is that I have the really the honor of being in the presence of a very powerful, capable woman who, when she was diagnosed with cancer, rather than having this woe is me, I am helpless, I will put all of my fate into the hand of doctors, and I do appreciate and love doctors, but you immediately began looking at, what can I do? You began doing the research and you began doing an audit in your home and recognizing, I imagine your home was beautiful always, but doing that audit and finding, is there anything within my home that, although it may be beautiful and it's a good thing for my eyes, is this a good thing for my body? Is this a good thing for the harmony of me? Is this a good match? And it just feels like you immediately began putting into action, what can I do? Is there anything I can do to improve this situation? And I loved the things that you brought up about epigenetics, which I don't know that everyone is familiar with. We have our genetics, which is just part of our DNA. This is who we are. And epigenetics means on top of genetics. And this is what can turn on and turn off different functions. So just because my mother and father had cancer, I might have that gene. But fortunately, we can have that epigenetics on top that says, you know what, let's just turn that off. And so even though we have genetics we really can't do anything about, the epigenetics we can. And that is very much influenced by our mental state and by our environment. So how beautiful that you recognize that and began to do something with it. And then I am so impressed that you're talking about here our autonomic nervous system, and you understand the difference between our parasympathetic and our sympathetic. And I even love that when you're talking about the sympathetic that you use the whole name, which is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Some people, including myself, just shorten it to fight or flight, which is not the whole story. And recognizing that when our body is in our fight or flight mode, that we actually, our body turns down or turns off our immune system. It's just part of the process of our turbo boost mode so that we can escape from danger. But if we stay there, our body cannot heal. And when we're dealing with something, well, anything, but when we're dealing with cancer, oh my goodness, would you please turn my immune system on? Will you please let my body heal itself as best as it possibly can? And the way to do that is to get into that, flip that relaxation mode. Let's get back into our rest and digest phase so that our body can help us heal. And here in your study and your research, you recognized all of those pieces. What can I do? And the answer is a lot. We can do a lot. So I just have to applaud you. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you so
Welcome.
much. Yeah, I one of the things that really resonated with what you just said is I didn't see myself as a victim. Yes, it's scary. And, the common medical paradigm of the drama triangle where the doctor's the hero and the cancer's the villain and you are the victim, it really kind of forces us to be passive in our own healing. And I love my team. I have to say, this is not an either or. And I write about this in my book, this binary thinking of, oh, it's naturopathic versus allopathic. Like to me, there's no conflict because I step back and I realize that a lot of times people triangulate those two things because they have advantage over them. There's a reason why we are pitted against one another, right? So stepping back and realizing, hey, everybody has their place and everybody has their roles. And how can I complement the treatment, the allopathic treatment that I was undergoing with these other healing modalities like hypnosis, like, meditation, like Reiki, all these other different aspects, like beauty. I would call my own therapy that I did for myself as a neuroaesthetics therapy. It's basically being documented now that patients increase their recovery rates. There's a study by 30% when they are healing in a room that has biophilic art. Even the biophilic meaning anything that is natural or, a picture of a plant, right? Even if it's Van Gogh's sunflowers, like even the idea of a flower has a neurological effect on us, Linda.
Isn't that cool? And I have to say, when I was reading through your bio, that word was new to me, biophilic. It's like, oh, I got to look that up. I don't know what that means. So, how beautiful that you've taught me something new, that this idea that nature, and the crazy thing is, even when it is a picture of nature, it does something for our bodies. And I also have read many studies that say, guys, nature is good for you. Go out
Yes.
into it, bring it in, and even pictures help our brain, which is crazy to me. So, how beautiful that we can have something that is beautiful that helps us physiologically, which is awesome. I love
It,
win-wins. I'm all in favor.
we have, our modern world has really bifurcated the arts and the sciences and separated them for some reason. And science has got this kind of air of validation, and it's all about measurement. And I quoted Bruce Lipton because there's a whole other level to the divine intelligence of our cells and I don't see science as being opposing spirituality, speaking of binary thinking. It actually is just another language for spirituality. That's all. That's
Mm,
all. And that's what I try to do. I try to merge that language. And that's where I wrote from in my book is to take the mythology of Persephone, who's the goddess of death and resurrection, and to become acquainted with and really embrace the cycle of death and life within us that happens because I wasn't trying to I mean, we all are going to die. It's a natural, it's a fact, right? But it's about accepting that and living our life to the most fullest of ways and in tune with our biology, in tune with the harmony of our space. And again, as a designer, I only use the things that I know, which are how to use and how to implement beauty and have it be not just the destination, but your vehicle to that place of alignment. Because I think when you're sick and when you're stressed, you need beauty the most, Linda.
yes, absolutely. And I love how you brought up this idea and this reminder that we don't have to choose sides, that really all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole, and that we can embrace, I can take this truth and say, wow, I sure appreciate how this helps me. And then I can reach over here and say, wow, I sure appreciate this truth and how it can help me. And I love that we don't have to choose sides and that we can be in harmony with ourselves and with the people around us. And then if we're not choosing sides, that also helps us so that we're not at war with other people and not at war within ourselves. So
Yeah,
beautiful
yeah.
ideas.
Thank you. It's like the right hand and the left hand. You may be right hand dominant, right with your right hand, but you still need your left hand. You still, your left hand and your right brain, your left brain, all the parts of us each have their place in our reality. And I think for me, it was about, I'll give you a real life example of how I used allopathic care and brought mythology into it. So while I was going through my chemo, I researched, of course, the drugs that I was taking. And I discovered that one of the drugs, Taxotere or Taxol, is derived from the Pacific yew tree, which is an ancient tree revered by the Druids, revered by the Greeks. It was the tree of the dead, revered by Hecate, the goddess of the death. Again, another Greek goddess that is associated with the underworld. But I realized that when I was going through chemo, instead of imagining having my being killed, my cells being murdered, I imagined being infused by divine wisdom, and that this gorgeous wisdom was infusing me with light. And I have meditations. I did meditations while I was going through radiation. I did all these mindset practices that it just felt right to me. And again, no one told me to do it. It was something I did out of intuition, out of just my personality of, hey, let's explore what this is and how can I bring my love of botany, because that's my nighttime reading is figuring out how to incorporate biophilia in every level of our existence.
Wow, how beautiful. And you trusted your intuition and you followed and you did it. And now, because you did it and you are sharing your experiences, it can help give that as a suggestion to other people and say, oh, well, I could try that. And how beautiful to have that mindset of I'm being infused with this beautiful light rather than my cells are dying. That is just amazing. I love that. Can we hear? I know you talk about creating our homes as just this oasis of healing and peace. So, how can I do that? How can I make my home become more of this healing oasis, a place that I really want to be?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. That is such a delicious question to answer. I'm like, where do I even begin? I would definitely start from your pleasure, Linda. What makes you happy? So if we travel back to when you were 6 years old, those times when we just never questioned what we liked, we just liked them. And I think sometimes as we grow older, we kind of hold ourselves back from liking things because is it what's in fashion? Like, I don't know. Is it, like the hot trend is mustard this year for interiors, and you may hate mustard. It may not look good against your skin. So to really kind of get back to what you love, what gives you pleasure. So that was my starting off point. And for me, it was, again, I'll give you another example. When I couldn't eat foods during my chemo, I started using the best china and spreading rose petals on my dining table and lighting candles to create ceremony, to create reverence for what I could imbibe instead of what I couldn't imbibe. So I started creating zones, like your living room is your zone. So on your coffee table, consider it your altar. Would you put, mail and old candy wrappers and, clutter on your altar? No, you would have things that have meaning for you. So pictures that remind you of beautiful memories. Cancer is transformative. I'm not trying to sugarcoat the grief. I'm not trying to sugarcoat the extreme terror that one feels. But in order to invite that feeling in instead of ignoring it, what I did was ground into the girl that I used to be because I didn't look the same. My hair was falling out, my face was swollen, my eyebrows were falling out, I had burns, I had so many complications, and I didn't look like my old self. So I took out a picture of when I was 15, before boys, before anything, when I was just happy and young. And I'm still that girl. And I think we have that inner child within us at all times. So feeding her and feeding him as you go through whatever calamity that you're going through, and looking at your space through that lens already will help you answer a lot of questions of what do I really like? Because when I was, hanging out at home, I started looking around and it was such a hot, yes, it was pretty, but again, I had so many like hand-me-downs from different projects that I was, trying to make work. And I said, no, I got to treat myself like a client. Like, what would I really have? And I started repainting, I started redecorating and throwing out things that didn't serve me, that I was holding on to, like we all do, right? So it's so important to recognize that your home is your sanctuary at all times. And it is really important that, for example, indoor air quality is far worse than outdoor air quality. It's really important to recognize that you can be living in a closed coffin where there's no air circulation and you're constantly recycling terrible air, or you can open the window, open the doors, allow the sun to come inside, allow the light to come inside. So it's about really practical tips, but also from a spiritual standpoint, that living ecosystem I was telling you, we are in a community with our environment. And why not create that level of synergy, especially now where modern life is actually the silent killer, if anything. So bringing that to the fore and saying, okay, ancient rituals that I grew up in Pakistan. We used to eat outside all the time. We used to eat under the night sky. Arab and Islamic architecture has an inner courtyard that's always open to the elements. It usually has a water feature, like a fountain, and it always has greenery and a little garden area, whether that's potted plants or even just a garden inside. But to create that indoor-outdoor space, that transitional space, is key. And frankly, with all the research I'm doing in quantum biology and our circadian rhythm, modern life screws up our circadian rhythm. And so many cancers are a result of circadian disruption, including new studies that are showing the exposure to blue light and breast cancer.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that one. That's fascinating. When I checked out your website and I was looking at the different things, and you mentioned one of the things about that quantum physics and having that be a part of your home. And I wasn't sure if we are going to get there, but you just brought it up. So I think we should go there. But before we do, for pause, I just really appreciate so many of the things that you brought up, how you were creating beauty and finding beauty in a very ugly situation. I heard you say, I couldn't eat. So I set beautiful china and rose petals, and I was swollen and my hair was falling out. And so it's not a time where you feel beautiful. And yet you pulled up that picture and said, you know what? I am this person. Not just that I was this person, I am. And our body and our physical appearance is not necessarily who we are. It is a part of us, but it's not who we are. That's deeper inside. And you recognized and held on to that. And I loved how you talked about making those decisions about what do I let go and what do I bring in. And that flow of allowing things to go. I think a lot of us are stuck in we don't want to let things go, and recognizing that it's okay. It's okay to let things go. And when we do that, it creates the space so that we can invite something new inside. So beautiful. I love it. I appreciate it. And you have been so very gentle as you've talked about your cancer experience. And I loved how you said, I'm not sugarcoating this, but you have treated it very gently. And you are not a cancer victim. You're not a cancer survivor. You are a champion. You are someone who has overcome your challenges. And that invites other people to become the champion of their own stories. So beautifully, beautifully done. So if it's okay, let's go a little bit deeper and say, all right, we've talked about how beauty affects us. It affects our mind. It helps us to be able to calm down our autonomic nervous system and turn on that rest and digest so our body can heal. And it's even more than that. You talked about how it can mess up just life, can mess up our circadian rhythm and it can get us out of harmony with this quantum physics. So I'm excited to learn some more.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was just a natural progression because I was looking at my nutrition and I suddenly fell into the idea that our circadian rhythm, and again, it ties into how I grew up. So already I was intrigued and enamored by it. But something so simple as the fact that we are ancient beings, and for thousands of years, our biology has kept in sync with the seasons and the cycles of the sun. And as much as we have, if you look at the existence of human beings on a 24-hour clock, the last 30 seconds is where we've found electricity. Okay. So to give an idea of most of our existence was tied to really the sun. And why I bring up light is we're light beings. We actually emit light. Our cells emit light. We just can't see it. Okay. We are photosynthesizing beings. And it's not just through our eyes. Our skin has photoreceptors. So in terms of looking at your blue screen, you might want to wear there's blue blocking glasses, but guess what? That screen is still bathing your chest in blue light. So it's something to consider because what's happening with quantum biology, and it's on an energetic level, if you were able to really take it down to that level, we are energetic beings and we are living batteries that need recharging. So how do I ground in a home? How do I figure out a way to create an optimal electrical charge in my body when my electricity and my Wi-Fi is robbing me of my own electrical charge? So thinking about that really helped me to start designing modalities and rituals and practices that I can then share with others to create a home that is completely in line from that lens. I'll give you a really simple one. I mentioned opening your window. I was laughing from an air circulation perspective, but did you know that since sunlight is not polarized, it bounces off surfaces? And as a designer, I would increase the light into a room by adding mirrors perpendicular to the window to amplify the light, and also reflections. I would paint ceilings with a really high gloss in low ceiling rooms to amplify the light. And now all of that actually benefits you because it helps you charge yourself. And I don't think many people know that. So
And
think of,
those,
yeah,
oh,
go
I'm so
ahead.
sorry. Those tips that you've given are pretty inexpensive, something that anyone can incorporate, which is so lovely. Because I would imagine some of the people that we have listening might be thinking, yeah, but I can't afford to redecorate my house, but I can put up a mirror. I can put high gloss paint on my ceiling. I can open a window. That's free. So,
Exactly.
there are things that we can do with what we have now to make things just a little better and turn it up just a little bit. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you are so sweet. You hit upon something that's a big touch point for me, which is, I'm a high-end designer in New York City. And I was, been doing workshops with other cancer patients, design workshops much like this. And one of the people said, but I can't afford you. And I went, wait a second, wait a second. This is stuff that anyone can do and everyone deserves beauty. And this is really important. When I say beauty, Linda, I mean divine grace, divine alignment, cellular alignment on every level of our being. Okay. So these things anyone and everyone can do now. That's why I called my book Purgatory to Paradise, because sometimes we live life by default and we're living in limbo in our own purgatory, whether we realize it or not. And I had these wonderful, insights on creating your paradise from a quantum level, from a design level, from a spiritual level, from all these places. And why not share it with the world? Because you can have your paradise right now and it doesn't have to cost you.
What an empowering and hopeful statement that I can have my paradise And it's not just someday. You said I can have it now. And that there's ways to do it that are inexpensive. And that beauty is for everyone, not just the people with a lot of money, that we all deserve beauty. And that goes back to that opening a window, stepping outside in that sunshine, enjoying some of nature, which is available. It's these things are intended for free. This is beauty that's given to everyone and that we can embrace and enjoy and appreciate. So, wow, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Thanks, Linda. I have a gift for your listeners, which is a list of 3 things you can have today that will help elevate your purgatory and create your paradise now. It's at claimyourparadise.com/OPT-IN, and you can download that list for free. And it has my curation of things that are vetted from a quantum perspective and from a high-end designer's perspective, in terms of creating your beauty today.
Oh, I am so excited to check that out. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you so much. And in my heart, I'm just giggling. It's like here we have this high-end New York designer who's sharing some tips for all of us that we can incorporate these small, wonderful, beautiful things to help create this paradise. So thank you for sharing with me and sharing with our listeners and making the world a better place. So thank you so much.
Absolutely my pleasure.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by John Muir. He said, "Everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to body and soul." Today, I invite our listeners to embrace and create beauty as a vehicle for joy and healing. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the Free Stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.